My dad took credit for paying for my wedding during his toast, but it was my stepfather who paid for everything. The wedding reception was bathed in a soft, golden light, a gentle glow that seemed to hug every corner of the room. Fairy lights twinkled above, creating a canopy of tiny stars, and the air hummed with the low, comforting melody of jazz. It was perfect. My husband, Liam, stood near the bar, his laughter echoing softly as he talked with his friends. My mother sat at a nearby table with her sisters, her eyes glistening with tears of joy, carefully dabbing them so as not to ruin her makeup. And Daniel sat quietly at our table, his large hands carefully folding his cloth napkin into a precise triangle, a familiar gesture that always brought a small smile to my face. It was a habit from countless family dinners, a small, comforting ritual. Everything around me felt beautiful, serene, utterly right. A sense of profound happiness settled within me, a feeling that this day, this moment, was everything I had ever hoped for. I stood up, a sudden impulse guiding me. I reached into my small clutch, my fingers finding the folded piece of paper I had tucked inside earlier. It was a short speech, a few heartfelt thank yous I wanted to express. One of them, the biggest one, was especially for Daniel. I wanted everyone to know, but before I could even unfold the paper, my biological father rose to his feet. He had arrived late to the reception, a fact that had already pricked at the edges of my carefully constructed happiness. And it was clear he had indulged in a few glasses of wine, his movements a little too loose, his voice a touch too loud. He held his glass aloft, as if addressing a boisterous reunion rather than a quiet wedding celebration. "Can I say something?" he announced, his voice cutting through the gentle murmur of conversation. Several heads turned. A few people nodded politely. Someone offered a hesitant clap. He beamed, a wide, slightly unsteady smile spreading across his face. He swayed almost imperceptibly and raised his glass even higher. "From the day she was born," he began, his words slurring just enough for the subtle imperfection to register. "A small crack in the perfect facade of the evening. I dreamed of giving her a beautiful wedding. And today," he paused for dramatic effect, his eyes sweeping across the room, catching mine for a fleeting, unsettling moment. "I made that happen, because that's what dads do." In that single, drawn-out moment, as his words hung in the air, the carefully constructed reality of the reception hall seemed to dissolve around me. The soft golden light faded, the gentle jazz became a distant hum, and the happy faces of my guests blurred. My mind was no longer in my elegant wedding dress, no longer focused on the joy of becoming Liam's wife. I wasn't even the confident, 30-year-old woman standing there, stunned and speechless. I was 6 again. I was sitting on the cold linoleum of our kitchen floor, the harsh fluorescent light casting long shadows. My mother knelt before me, her face pale and etched with a sadness I couldn't fully comprehend, but felt deep in my small heart. She held my worn, beloved stuffed bear in one hand, and with the other, she gently cupped my face. "It's going to be just us for a while, baby," she had said, her voice soft but firm. And she had meant it. My biological father hadn't said goodbye. There had been no tearful farewell, no explanation, no comforting words. He had simply vanished, gone, a void where a father should have been. After that, the phone calls were sporadic, infrequent, maybe twice a year, if I was lucky. Usually around Christmas and my birthday, perfunctory check-ins that felt more like an obligation than a heartfelt connection. Then, when I turned 10, the phone remained silent. My birthday cake, a small, store-bought affair with too much frosting, sat half-eaten on the porch beside me. I watched the sky bleed into shades of pink and orange as the sun dipped below the horizon, a quiet, solitary spectacle. Mom sat beside me, her arm around my shoulders, her presence a silent comfort. "Let's not waste a good birthday waiting on someone who doesn't show up," she had said, her voice gentle but laced with a familiar weariness. Sometimes a check would arrive in the mail, a flimsy piece of paper attempting to bridge the vast emotional distance. Sometimes it wouldn't. Once, the check even bounced, a small, tangible representation of the unreliability I had come to expect. I learned not to count on him for anything. He missed so much. My first awkward dance recital, where I stumbled and blushed but still managed a shaky bow. My first science fair, where my volcano model oozed more baking soda than lava. My first real heartbreak, the kind that felt like a physical ache in my chest. I never stopped hoping, though, a small, foolish part of me clinging to the childish fantasy that one day he would surprise me, that he would just show up, unannounced, and everything would somehow be okay, but he never did. Then there were the Facebook posts. That's where he truly made his presence known, in the curated, public world of online interactions. When I made the honor roll in high school, Mom proudly posted the news. His comment appeared quickly beneath it. "So proud of my girl." When I got accepted into college, another pronouncement, "Knew she'd make it." Empty words floating in the digital ether. He hadn't helped with a single application, hadn't offered a single dollar towards tuition, hadn't even asked what I needed. Not once did he pick up the phone and offer genuine support. Daniel, however, was a completely different constellation in our small family universe. He entered our lives when I was 8, a quiet, gentle man with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled and wore sensible glasses that always seemed a little crooked. He talked slowly, thoughtfully, as if carefully choosing each word, a person who genuinely wanted to understand and be understood. On their third date, a seemingly insignificant event that now held immense weight in my memory, he brought me a puzzle. While Mom cooked dinner in the small kitchen, Daniel and I sat at the worn wooden table, carefully sorting through the pieces. He patiently helped me find all the edge pieces first, his large fingers surprisingly adept at the task. "You're good at this," he had said, his voice calm and encouraging. I had shrugged, a typical 8-year-old trying to appear unimpressed. "You're not bad yourself." They got married when I was 10, a small, intimate ceremony in our living room. I didn't call him dad right away. The word felt foreign, awkward, especially in front of others. But when it was just me and him, in the quiet moments of our days, sometimes it slipped out. He never asked me to. He just kept showing up. When our chaotic, often absent-minded soccer coach quit abruptly, Daniel, who had never played soccer in his life, stepped in. He volunteered his time, showing up early to every practice, staying late to help us with drills, and always bringing extra water bottles and encouraging words. He came to every school play, even the ones where I had no lines and simply stood. On stage as a silent tree, my face painted green. He would sit in the audience, his gaze unwavering, and offer a genuine, enthusiastic bravo at the end. One night during my senior prom, the carefully constructed glamour of the evening suddenly crumbled. I called him from the crowded, noisy venue, my voice choked with panic. I couldn't breathe, a suffocating wave of anxiety washing over me. I felt like the walls were closing in, the music pounding in my ears. He didn't ask a barrage of questions, didn't try to minimize my feelings. He simply said, his voice a calm anchor in my rising storm, "Stay where you are. I'm coming." And he did. He showed up in jeans and a t-shirt, his presence a stark contrast to the swirling gowns and tuxedos. He drove me home with the windows down, the cool night air rushing in, the music from the radio turned low, his quiet presence a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. The summer before college, a sudden, unexpected increase in tuition threatened to derail my carefully laid plans. The financial burden loomed large, a dark cloud over my excitement. The weight of the increased tuition costs settled upon me at the kitchen table, a crushing burden that threatened to extinguish the bright flame of my dreams. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the acceptance letter from my dream school, the very paper that had once filled me with such soaring hope. I cried, the sound muffled by my hands, the realization sinking in that this might be the end of that particular journey before it even began. Mom, her face pale and drawn with worry, watched me, her own fear mirroring mine. The future felt uncertain, the path ahead suddenly blocked by a financial wall that seemed insurmountable. Daniel, ever the quiet observer, simply nodded, his gaze steady and reassuring. "Let me figure something out," he said, his voice calm and even, a familiar anchor in the swirling storm of my emotions. And just like that, he took action. That very week, he picked up a side consulting job, adding extra hours to his already demanding schedule. He didn't make a grand announcement, didn't seek praise or recognition. He simply worked, his quiet determination a silent promise. It wasn't until the college payment cleared, the notification appearing unexpectedly on my phone screen, that he finally mentioned his extra work. "Don't thank me," he said, his eyes meeting mine with a gentle firmness. "You've earned this." That was Daniel in his essence, unassuming, reliable, always there, a silent force working tirelessly behind the scenes. He never sought the spotlight, never craved accolades. His actions spoke volumes, his quiet support a constant presence in my life. Though I didn't voice it aloud at the time, the sentiment echoed in my heart every single day. "You're my real dad." When Liam proposed, a moment filled with such joy and promise, Daniel's reaction was characteristically understated. No booming pronouncements, no elaborate displays of emotion. He simply offered a warm, genuine smile, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "He's a lucky guy." His words, though few, carried a weight of sincerity that meant more than any grand gesture. A week later, Mom and I were huddled over my laptop, the screen filled with images of rustic barns and sprawling vineyards, the potential backdrops for my wedding swirling before us like a romantic dream. Daniel joined us, settling quietly into a nearby armchair. He watched us for a while, his gaze soft, and then waited patiently until Mom rose to refill her coffee cup, creating a brief moment of private intimacy. He leaned in, his voice gentle and low, and said, "I want you to have the day you deserve. Let me take care of it." I looked at him, a little stunned by the quiet generosity of his offer. "Daniel, it's a lot," I stammered, the enormity of wedding expenses flashing through my mind. He simply waved his hand dismissively, his eyes filled with a quiet determination. "You only get one wedding, and it should feel like everything you dreamed of." And he kept his word, fulfilling his promise with the same quiet steadfastness that defined his every action. He paid for the breathtaking dress I had fallen in love with the moment I first tried it on, a vision of lace and silk. That made me feel like a fairy tale princess. He covered the cost of the stunning venue, a historic estate with sprawling gardens and a grand ballroom. He ensured the food was exquisite, a feast that delighted every palate. He arranged for the most beautiful flowers, transforming the reception into a fragrant, vibrant dreamscape. He even hired the talented photographer whose candid shots captured the genuine joy and fleeting moments I knew I would treasure forever. Every time I tentatively suggested contributing something, even something small like the shoes or the invitations, he would simply smile, a gentle, unwavering expression, and say, "This is my gift to you." When I tentatively broached the idea of him walking me down the aisle, a silent question hanging in the air between us, he paused. I could see a flicker of emotion behind his eyes, a brief hesitation before a quiet resolve settled in. "I'd be honored," he said softly. his voice filled with a deep sincerity. "But I don't want you caught in the middle. If it'll cause drama, if it will make your day any less perfect, I'll step back. This day is yours, and your happiness is all that matters." I couldn't believe the depth of his grace, the selfless way he navigated a moment that could have easily been about him, yet he still placed my feelings and my peace first. Meanwhile, my biological father remained a distant figure. He didn't call to ask about the date, didn't inquire about the venue, didn't offer a single word of help or a single cent of financial support. When I finally texted him the essential details of the wedding, a brief impersonal message, he responded 3 days later with a curt, dismissive, "Cool, bringing someone. Hope that's fine." That was it. No, "Can I help with anything?" No, "How are you feeling about the big day?" Still the same emotional distance, the same self-absorption. True to form, he arrived late to the wedding, a woman I had never met, and who remained nameless throughout the evening, clinging to his arm. He already had a drink in hand, his movements a little too boisterous for the elegant setting. And then, during the reception, he clinked his wine glass with a spoon, the sound jarring the gentle atmosphere, and stood to make his impromptu, self-congratulatory speech. In that moment, something inside me froze, a familiar coldness spreading through my veins. For a long, suspended moment, no one moved. Then, a smattering of polite, confused applause rippled through the room. My stomach churned, a wave of nausea rising within me. Daniel sat utterly motionless at our table. His eyes, which had been filled with such warmth and pride throughout the day, were now downcast, fixed on his lap. The linen napkin he had so meticulously folded earlier was now clutched tightly in one fist, his knuckles bone white. I scanned the room, my gaze desperately seeking connection, understanding. Liam, my new husband, looked uncertain, his brow furrowed in confusion. Mom stared intently at the floor, her expression unreadable. Nobody said a word. The silence that followed his pronouncement felt heavier, more significant than any words he could have spoken. My chest tightened, a familiar ache of disappointment and resentment rising within me. I had prepared a thank you speech, a short, kind, safe acknowledgement of the people who had supported us. But in that moment, the carefully chosen words felt hollow, inadequate. The atmosphere in the room had shifted, the air thick with unspoken truths and uncomfortable silences. So I stood. I didn't wait for a microphone. I didn't unfold the paper in my trembling hand. I simply looked out at the gathered faces and allowed the truth that had been simmering within me for so long to finally surface. "Hi," I began, my voice louder than I intended, the unexpected volume cutting through the lingering awkwardness. It shook slightly, betraying the turmoil within, but I didn't falter. "Thank you all for being here, for showing up, not just today, but through the years." Heads turned, conversations ceased, all eyes focused on me. "I want to take a moment to thank the man who really made this day happen," I continued, my gaze softening as I turned towards Daniel. "The man who never missed a birthday, no matter how insignificant it might have seemed to others. The one who stayed up late, patiently helping me with my often disastrous science projects, who volunteered to coach my soccer team when no one else would, who quietly worked extra hours so I could pursue my dreams of going to college." I stepped closer to his table, my eyes meeting his across the small distance. In that brief connection, the noise and the faces in the room seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of us. "The man who gave everything," I said, my voice thick with emotion, quietly, without ever asking for credit or recognition, who never made a grand speech but always made a profound difference in my life. I closed the remaining distance between us. "Dad," I whispered, the word feeling so right, so true, as it finally left my lips. "This day, this beautiful beginning, was possible because of you. I love you." His eyes blinked rapidly, and tears, genuine and heartfelt, slipped down his weathered cheeks. Mom reached over and squeezed his hand, her touch a silent acknowledgement of the truth I had just spoken, and he held her hand tightly, his knuckles still white. A few people in the audience dabbed at their eyes. A solitary clap broke the silence from the back of the room. Then another, and another, until a wave of heartfelt applause filled the space. I walked over to Daniel and wrapped my arms around him, holding him tightly. He didn't say anything, his embrace conveying more than words ever could. Behind me, I could feel the weight of my biological father's gaze, still fixed on the swirling remnants of wine in his glass. He didn't speak again that night, and in that moment, surrounded by the love and support of my chosen family, the heavy weight I had carried for so many years finally began to lift, replaced by a profound sense of peace and the unwavering knowledge of who my real father truly was.